So greetings everyone. Welcome to the 246th session of the online Optom learning series OOLS. And for today's session, we have with us Fabio. Fabio is an Italian optometrist. He has a diploma in optometry and also he is a fellow of the British Contact Lens Association. On the professional upfront, he is the Global Professional Service Manager for the Myopia Management Business Division at Menicon, and we are also thankful for Menicon to provide this education support to us for this session. So welcome, Fabio. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss about the efficacy and safety of orthokeratology lenses for myopia control. I know that we have heard a lot of talks and we know by now that myopia management or myopia control for an optometrist is very essential and important. And, thank you for taking out time to discuss about the safety and efficacy in terms of ortho lenses. So over to you, Fabio, and take us through the insights, please.
Thank you very much, Faculty, for the invitation, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, wherever you are. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I do my best to provide you all the information about safety, efficacy of ortho lenses for myopia control. So, as Faculty already mentioned, I'm an Italian optometrist. I'm a full-time employee of Menicon. So here my disclosure. But as you can see from my background, so it's real, it's not fake. I'm in my private practice, the small private practice in Sardinia. Sardinia is an island in the heart of the Mediterranean Sea in Italy, and where sometimes I play with contact lenses when I'm not working for Menicon. So this is roughly the agenda of the day. I will talk about a little bit of prevalence of myopia, even if probably most of you already are fully aware of the situation, but it's good to have a refresh on what's going on around the world. And then we can join in detail on efficacy of ortho-K. I will share with you the latest publication on efficacy. And then we move on the science behind of ortho-K treatment, and then we move to the safety of ortho-K. I will close my presentation with the proposal, with the offering of Menicon in the myopia control, myopia management, and how this offering can improve safety and efficacy. And then I will leave you for Q&A session at the end. I hope everybody agrees that myopia can no longer be considered just a minor inconvenience, visual inconvenience requiring correction, but a disease process creating significant risk of serious eye disease later in life. So myopia matters, and we cannot underestimate anymore. So as there are enough evidence providing that proof that the more myopia, the higher risk of disease later we will face later in life. So even if it's not high myopia, but also the low myopia and moderate myopia has to take in consideration, into account during our practice every day. Probably most of you are already familiar with this picture, with this slide, but it's just to give you an overview of the differences between countries. So the prevalence of myopia it's a condition that is spread almost everywhere. I think there isn't a country in the world that does not have any myopes. So, however, we know that the prevalence of this condition differs from some part of the world to other part of the world. So the highest prevalence we have in Asia, where the range varies from 53% to 83% of the population. For example, for 53 in China and 83 in Taiwan. but also there are other countries like Hong Kong, 80%. Well, you can see also India, 19%, but I will deep dive a little bit more on India in a couple of slides. So I think this publication, because these numbers are coming from the Brian Alden article that was published in Ophthalmology in 2016, I mean, everything, all the noise, all the movements of our category on myopia started from that point. I mean, this was the breakdown moment where everybody start to think about more on myopia progression and myopia control. I did make a research on what's going on in India, for example, and it's very difficult because there are some conflicting information. So I found two interesting articles. The first one is this one, Myopia in India, in Clinical Ophthalmology, where there is still an evolution of understanding what's going on in terms of number, because the country, it's so diverse from one part to another. So it's very difficult to measure the rates of the prevalence of myopia in India. But we can, of course, do some kind of estimation. And I found this one, another article, an interesting article on the time trends of the prevalence of myopia in India. So it's a prediction model for 2050. The prevalence of myopia at the moment in India, I mean, no, not at the moment. So from the age of 5 to 15 years old, the urban children, because we also have to take in consideration the environment where children grow up, because rural and urban are very different. So for sure, in urban children, myopia progress faster than the rural children. But in the last 20 years, the myopia incidence increased by almost 15%, because we started with 4% in 1999, and in 2089, sorry, the prevalence is now 21%. And if we make an estimation from now to 2050, you can see that there is an increase rates of myopia in this country. So from 32% almost in 2030, 40% in 2040, and 48% in 2050, which match perfectly with the estimation of Brian Alden of 50% of the global population will be myopic in 2050. But let me also share with you this another article I found really interesting, and this is the myopia incidence in Singapore. But they measure this, the authors measure a range of children. We are talking about 11,800 children from 1996 to 1997. And as you can see, they also split it in the three major ethnicity present in Singapore. So Chinese, Malay, and India. So, and they measure again after 12 years, but with a higher number of children. So from 2009 to 2010, they measure myopia in 23,000 children. And as you can see, there is an interesting number. If we compare with the previous article, with the previous data I show you, is that the incidence of myopia for Indian children in 2010 is 74%. If we compare to the previous one, that was definitely lower, we can already make we can we can take in consideration that the behavior and the environment where children grow up is definitely more important than the ethnicity. So ethnicity is important, but the behavior and the environment, it's definitely more impactful on the progression of myopia. And if you can also watch the high myopia, because we have the low myopia and the high myopia, we can see that the percentage is still quite high. So we have in high myopia in Indian children, 41 Indian children is 6%. So which is for high myopia is still is already a high number. So why why high myopia is so important? Well, there are three main key factors that are crucial for visual impairments. The first one is the age. The second is myopia degrees, as I already mentioned. And the third one is the axial elongation. So the risk of visual impairments later in life is strongly related with the axial elongation. Higher myopia and age older than 60 years old. Although high myopia is the most important to take in consideration because the high myopic children has the higher risk of complication and visual impairment, we have to take in consideration also the low and the moderate myopia, because we cannot underestimate, because there is also an impact of on pathologies also for this condition. So myopic maculopathy degeneration, retinal detachment, open angle glaucoma, and cataracts are the four irreversible visual impairment that we can face with link with myopia progression. And the last sentence is about that we have to take in consideration as well, is that myopia is the most common cause of reversible visual impairment in the working population. Okay, well, myopia and ocular pathology, I already mentioned to you that we have four severe conditions that we have to take into account, but the most important one is definitely the myopic maculopathy degeneration, MMD, which is a common cause of visual impairment, particularly linked with high myopia. So the prevalence of MMD varies from 13 to 65% in high myopes, from 0.3% to 7 or 8% in moderate myopes, and from 0.1 to 7% in low myopes. So that's why I was saying that we cannot underestimate the low myopes, the low and the medium, the moderate myopia, because this also has an impact on later in life for these pathologies. And on top of MMD, it's statistically demonstrated that there is a connection between two of the most common pathologies that I already mentioned. So glaucoma, open angle glaucoma, and cataracts. In this scheme, you can see the probability linked to develop to face with these pathologies with the level of myopia. So you can see that the red one are the most serious one. So retinal detachment and myopic maculopathy, MMD, are strictly related to the medium and to moderate myopia and to high myopia. So, for example, over 6 diopters, we have 41% of probability to times to have MMD later in life. So it's quite important to take into account myopia. Okay, so final slide on this part of the prevalence and incidence of myopia in these four points. The first one is that by 2050, 50% of the population could be myopic and 10% with high myopia. Number two, countries like China, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, they already have a high percentage of myopes, will be even more in 2050. Number three, up to 1 billion people could be at risk of blindness by 2050 if myopia epidemic is ignored. And last but not least, number four, the level of myopia are expecting to rise from approximately 2 billion to 5 billion by 2050. Okay, we can jump now into the efficacy. So what we can do, I mean, we know that there is myopia is growing very fast, almost all over the world. The impact of high myopia is very important to take into account for preventing pathologies later in life. Okay, but what we can do as ECPs? Well, for sure, we know we cannot stop it, but we can slow it down. So improving the quality of life of our patient, of our children, with different treatment options. This is an interesting review on the efficacy of different treatment options. And you can see we have atropine, pharmaceutical, we have orthokeratology, we have multifocal contact lenses. The article was published in 2018, so probably is not updated with the latest treatment option like lights therapy, for example, or the latest spectacle, anti-myopia spectacle glasses. But we can see that most of the treatment option are here in this review. And among these different treatment options for myopia control, orthokeratology has the most and substantial volume of evidence supporting its effectiveness in controlling myopia. So we can probably say that Ortho-K is one of the most and widely tested options for myopia control treatment. Like this paper, this is one of the white paper published by the International Myopia Institute, by the IMI, so James Wilson and big names like Nicola Logan or Rebecca Wang. So they published this white paper where orthokeratology seems to be one of the most tested and most safety treatment option for myopia control. Okay, so, but how effective are Ortho-K lenses in slowing myopia progression? Well, results from systematic reviews and meta-analysis, which provide the highest level of scientific evidence, have concluded that Ortho-K lens wear reduced the axial elongation of the eye in children by almost 0.20 millimeters over the first year, and by around 0.25 millimeters to 0.30 over 2 years of lens wear, if we compare to single vision spectacles or single vision contact lenses. An interesting finding is that there seems to be an initial burst in efficacy during the first year. In fact, if you look at these numbers, we can see that 60 to 70% of the treatment effect happen the first year. This is not only for orthokeratology. This is not an isolated phenomenon associated with Ortho-K lens wear, but rather common feature among all different myopia control treatment option, including also the multifocal contact lenses and atropine. This is another interesting study that was published in 2012 in clinical investigative ophthalmologists by Pauline Chu and her team from Hong Kong Polytech. And this is a randomized single mask prospective clinical trial. And they measure 2 years, for 2 years, 102 children, almost 100 children, aged from 6 to 10 years old, in comparison with, well, they split it into groups. One group was wearing Menicon Z-Night, Menicon Orthokeratology lens, and the other group was wearing a single vision spectacle. So they just measure the axial elongation after 2 years. An interesting finding is that at the end of the study, so after 24 months, the myopia control effect compared to the control group was 0.27 millimeters in absolute value less than the control group. So which means 43% of efficacy in controlling myopia progression. 1 year later, the same team published another article, another clinical trial with the more or less the same structure of the trial. In this case, was non-randomized compared to Romeo that was randomized, but it's a single mask perspective, and the sample size here was 80 children, aged between 6 and 12 years old. But in this case, this sample size include also astigmatic patients. So Romeo, the first clinical trial I just shared with you, included only spheric myopic, so only children without astigmatic component. But here there is also, they included also an astigmatism value between 1.25 and 3.50. So high number, high value of astigmatic astigmatic element component. And then at the end of the study, so 2 years, control group wearing single vision spectacle lenses compare the Ortho-K. So this is the control group, and this is the Ortho-K, the overnight orthokeratology group. So you can see here the difference between these two groups was in absolute value of 0.33 millimeters, which means 52% less progression of myopia compared to the control group. Again, I repeat it, single vision spectacle, not contact lenses, single vision spectacle. These two studies, Romeo and 2C study, were performing with Asian population. But now I can share with you another article done in Europe with a different ethnicity, with a different races, because here we are talking about Caucasian children. So again, 2 years, one group wearing orthokeratology lenses, the control group was wearing single vision spectacles, and 61 children, so again, single mask, prospective again, so highest standard for a clinical trial. And they measure the myopia progression in these two groups after 2 years. So you can see here the amount, the absolute value is a little bit lower than the previous one, also because the sample size is lower. So 60 children compare 180. And the efficacy at the end was 32%. But if we combine, if we pull together, all together, this data coming from these three different studies, we can definitely say that after 2 years of Ortho-K lens were compared a single vision spectacle control group, we obtained 0.28 millimeters in absolute value of myopia control effect, which means in percentage 43% versus the control group. Now, recently, my colleague and good friend Jacinto Santo Domingo and et al. Recently published in Contact Lens Anterior Eye a new article where they made some analysis on these three studies that I just shared with you in a relatively large number of ortho-K lens wearers, in which we were able to report a couple of key findings. They were able to report some interesting points. So the first one is that the efficacy of ortho-K in slowing myopia progression seems to be independent by age of the patient, by gender, by ethnicity, and by mean spherical refractive error. So, which is a good finding because we no longer need to be worried. So we know that the treatment effect of orthokeratology is independent of these four items. And if we look at this graph, we can see that the physiological eye growth of a normal eye, progress 0.1 to 0.2 millimeters per year. So 41% of these 250, well, 250 is the total amount of participants. So we need to split into two groups, the control group and the ortho-K groups. So we are now referring to more or less 50% of these 250. So I mean 120 about children. So after 2 years, they benefit from the ortho-K treatment because they progress only 0.30 less than 0.30 millimeters after 2 years. So 41%. 34%, they progress between 0.30 and 0.59 millimeters. And only 25% didn't have any positive impact because you can see that they progress over 0.59%. So similar to what was happening in the spectacle, in the single vision spectacle group. But we can say that 75% of this sample size get benefit in slowing myopia progression for high myopia and for low myopia progression. Another interesting article was recently published in Ophthalmic and Physiological Optics by Noel Brennan and Mark Bullimore about the rebound effect. Well, there are some contradictory articles that some of them are in favor, saying that there is no rebound. Some of them saying there is a rebound effect. Well, this is the latest article, and that's why I use this one. You can see that there are all the treatment options, well, most of them, red light therapy, atropine, overnight orthokeratology, atropine under 0.1%, so with different dosage, spectacles and soft contact lenses. Well, the rebound effect after 1 year of ortho-K wear is about 0.03 to 0.14 millimeters. So again, talking about in axial elongation, so in absolute value for the axial elongation in millimeters, which is pretty much in line with the mean average of all the annualized rebound, combining all together all the treatment option, which is 0.05 from 0.05 to 0.10 millimeters. So there is not so much difference between the average of the total treatment option and orthokeratology. But we still need some data to support the efficacy report, also with a larger, higher, larger time of wear. Okay, so that was for efficacy, and now we can jump into the safety part of my presentation. Well, safety first, of course. We usually every day we are fitting our contact lenses to our children, or not children, but what I mean. The first goal our first goal is to keep the best safety, to provide the best safety for our children. So there are different ways to assess safety, but clinically, ECPs are typically interested in understanding the impact of ortho-K lens wear in slit lamp findings. So the adverse events and complication typically associated with ortho-K lens wear, and understand the incidence of more severe complication like corneal infiltrates or microbial keratitis. Again, my good friend and colleague Jack Santo Domingo recently published another interesting article on in contact lens anterior eye. So I think it's in 2 months ago, so in 2024. So it's really a recent publication with the title "The Safety of Orthokeratology Contact Lens Wear in Slowing the Axial Elongation of the Eye in Children." And you can see that they analyze a relatively large number of ortho-K lens wearers. The number of visits, so we are not talking about the number of patients, but number of visits, is showing the incidence of slit lamp findings grades. So taking into account the grading scales that I have in my back here, you can see in my poster, very clear in my private practice. And interesting is that no significant differences between the groups where no significant difference were found between the groups in the total number of slit lamp findings with grades more than grade 2. So after grade 2, this means that the ortho-K contact lens wear does not appear to impact significantly on the slit lamp findings. So the number of slit lamp findings were very, very, very low. So several studies have estimated the incidence rate of adverse events associated with ortho-K lens wear in pediatric patients, including the one, for example, by Dr. Hiraoka that I had the pleasure to meet during the IMC this year in China. Dr. Hiraoka is based in Japan, and he published an interesting article on the incidence rate of adverse events during orthokeratology lens wear. But you can see there are 4 main publications that we collected together. If we pull the data from all these studies together, the pool incidence rate is about 18% per 100 patient years, not 100 patients, 100 years. So we are talking about 100 patient years, which is a very low number, 80%, 18%. Because we also, you can see from this table that most of them were not significant at all. So not severe, not serious adverse events, significant, very low percentage, and not significant, like, for example, staining, corneal staining, central corneal staining. So very easy to manage adverse events. So the percentage, as I said, is about, for if we pull together these four publications, if we pull together the incidence of adverse anterior eye adverse events in overnight orthokeratology is 18% per 100 patient years. So the question is, do you think is it low number or is it high number? What if we compare, for example, with soft contact lenses? And that's what we have done. So if we compare the pool incidence rate of adverse events between overnight orthokeratology and daily wear soft contact lenses in children, we can see that there is not so much difference between these two modalities. So we are talking about 18.4% over per 100 patient years. Again, I repeated, years, not talking about patient years. And if we and 16% for daily wear soft contact lenses. So there is about 2% of difference between these groups. So we can definitely say that orthokeratology is a safety modality, and we can prevent easily serious adverse events. So the most common complication were, as I already said, as I already mentioned, superficial trace, corneal, central cornea. So the corneal staining in the central cornea peaks during the first weeks or month of lens wear, and especially with higher myopia, because we need to increase the flattening of the base curve to better control myopia progression. But also we have not only corneal staining, but for example, lens binding and imprinting, which is relatively common. The incidence is about 30 to 60%, and it's observed mainly on eye open and associated with corneal indentation ring and central corneal staining. What we can do to improve the safety and to reduce these adverse events? Well, there are few simple tips. For example, using an eye drop or lubricant drops upon awakening, and how to apply gentle pressure to the lens when we have to remove the lens. Talking about a more serious adverse events or microbial keratitis in children, I found two interesting publications. And if we collect together, if we pull together these numbers, again, per 100 patient years of wear, we can see that if we compare microbial keratitis, the incidence of microbial keratitis in daily wear soft contact lenses versus overnight orthokeratology, split it in three different groups for children, kids up to 12 years old, teenager between 13 and 17 years old, and minors over 18 years old. You can see there is not so much difference between these two groups, between soft and ortho-K. I think the most interesting finding is that we have a higher percentage in teenagers compared to kids. So this is really, really interesting and needs, well, for us, has to be a warning for this kind of patient. So again, how we can improve the safety? Well, there are a couple of simple rules to follow. The first one is definitely improve the lens care regimen, even if seems to be a very logical thing, but is not. So rubbing before or during, after removal, the lens. Use intensive cleaner, cleaning, for example, a cleaning protein remover or disinfectant. Or if we believe that the multipurpose solution is not enough, we can switch to peroxide, for example. So these are important not only for improving the safety, but on the other hand, it's important to enhance on eye wettability, wearing comfort, the optical quality. So the vision, the quality of vision improve if we follow these simple rules. And also, of course, reduce the risk of ocular complication. Now, what Menicon did to improve the safety and the efficacy of orthokeratology? Well, a couple of years ago, we introduced in the market Menicon Bloom Night. Menicon Bloom Night is an ortho-K lens, and it's part of a more wider system called Menicon Bloom, where we have not only an ortho-K lens, but also we have a soft daily disposable lens for myopia control. We have a dedicated software, cloud-based software, where all the ECPs can calculate the first fit lens with a success of almost 90% of with the first lens, and 100% with the second lens. So this software is really useful in your daily practice because track the patient progress, can make analysis, and reminder for the fittings, for the checkups. And then we have also introduced an app. This app is very useful for improving the communication between patient, between children, for example, and the practitioner, with nice video tutorial, with reminders for when and how to remove the lens, when and how to fit the lens. And then, of course, last but not least, the care solution of Menicon Bloom Care and Menicon Bloom Progen. So the intensive cleaner and the MPS solution. But today, the main topic is talking about orthokeratology. So let me share with you a couple of very important information about Menicon Bloom Night. Menicon Bloom Night, we have in two different options, so sphere and toric, and this is the first ortho-K lens CE approved specifically for myopia control. We gained the approval in May 2019. So this lens is specific address for myopia control. At the moment, the sphere is up to -4, but in the coming month, we are working to extend the prescription up to -6. So it will be, you will see sooner. You will see soon that this -4 will be -6. So why I'm saying that this lens is the perfect lens for myopic children in progressive myopia? Well, first of all, in terms of safety, we can say that we have a very well tested material called Z material. Menicon Z material is an FDA approved for 30 days in continuous wear, with very high number of decay. We are talking about 180. So the decay over T is very high, with mechanical properties like resistant to scratches, breakage, flexion, and we also have less deposit adhesion. How we improve the design of the lens for children. At the beginning of the presentation, I shared with you 3 studies done by Polincio and her team, so the Romeo study, 2C study, MCOS study. These 3 studies were performed with Menicon Z Night. So Z Night, Bloom Night at that time, 2012, 2013, it doesn't exist. So that's why they started using Menicon Z Night at that time. But when we launched Menicon Bloom Night, we improved the design of Menicon Z Night in a couple of features. The first one is that we received the CE approved for myopia control. So this means that if we want to manage myopic children and control myopia progression, between these 2 lenses, Menicon Bloom Night is the one who has a specific indication for myopia control. Menicon Z Night is for myopia correction. So progressive myopia with Menicon Bloom Night and stable myopia with Menicon Z Night. Children is the target for Menicon Bloom Night, adults for Menicon Z Night. So there is a difference between these 2 products. So the position in the market is different. This is another key feature to improve the safety. Menicon Bloom Night is a 6-month replacement lens compared to Menicon Z Night, which is a 1-year replacement. So we want to provide the best safety for our children in reducing the time, the replacement time from 1 year to 6 months. And then the tracking is required for Menicon Bloom Night through the software that I mentioned to you, Menicon Bloom Easy Fit, a couple of few slides ago. And then for Menicon Z Night is an option. So labeling on myopia is on label, Menicon Bloom Night for myopia control, off label if we want to. We can use Menicon Z Night for myopia control. It's not, there is no restriction, but you are using Menicon Z Night off label. So it's an off label usage. If you use Menicon Bloom Night, it's a non label usage. And in the IPAO, you can check that there is the statement saying that a correction of refractive myopia and myopia control for Menicon Bloom Night. For Menicon Z Night is correction of refractive myopia, only correction, non-control. And now the key features. So this is the real difference in terms of design between these 2 lenses. So the lens height is different because in Menicon Bloom Night is calculated from the center of the lens to the landing zone. So it's variable lens height. But in Menicon Z Night, the height of the lens is the spline zone. And I can show you a very nice video, a very nice animation that explains better than me how it works. So we enhance the design to increase the safety for children. So here are very simple animation where you can understand what are the difference between Z Night and Bloom Night and why Bloom Night is safer than Z Night. So we have a spline zone fix, which means the lens height is we don't know exactly what is the apical clearance of the lens. If we want to increase, if we want to flatten the base curve to increase the myopia control treatment effect, we need to flatten the base curve. So we don't know where the lens, if the lens is touching the apex of the cornea. But for Menicon Bloom Night, the design is different because we change the, we have a spline zone variable, which means the apical clearance is fixed. So it's always 10 microns. Whatever myopia control degrees you are managing, the software is able to calculate the lens, keeping a buffer, safety buffer of 10 microns of apical clearance. This is done because mainly to avoid any kind of not serious adverse events like central corneal staining, as we discussed earlier. And probably in this slide you can better understand. So if we have Menicons at night and we want to increase myopia control treatment, we need to flatten the base curve. Flattening the base curve, we reduce the apical clearance. But this is not what happened in Menicon Blue Night, because we have a variable lens height. So if we want to flatten the base curve, if we want to increase the myopia treatment effect, we can flatten the base curve, but keeping the buffer of 10 microns of the apical clearance, which gave definitely a higher level of safety for the children. What we can do to even more improve the efficacy of the lens? Well, in 2022, Pauline Chu and her team published in Contact Lens Anterior Eye an interesting publication, an interesting article, an interesting trial. The title is Orthokeratology Lenses with Increased Compression Factor, a 2-year longitudinal clinical trial for myopia control. Again, it's a prospective control clinical trial, and they measure in 2 different groups. One group was wearing Menicon Blue Night lenses with conventional compression factor, which is 0.75, and another group with the same lens, but with an increased compression factor of 1.75. So after 2 years, you can see that if we compare these 2 groups, so the conventional compression factor group with 0.75 to increase compression factor group 1.75, after 2 years, the treatment effect was higher with the increased compression factor by 34%. I mean, we can say that increasing compression factor could be a better treatment effect. This is the only study at the moment, as far as I know, with 24 months. But I think there is the need to prove more and more the efficacy of increasing compression factor to have a better myopia control. But if we take into account that increasing the compression factor, we can have a better efficacy in myopia control treatment, we recently include this new feature in Menicon Bloom Easy Fit in order for the ECPs to have the opportunity to modify the level, the amount of compression factor. That's why we offer the opportunity to change from high to medium to low compression factor. Low, it's 0.50. So it means that we recommend to use the conventional compression factor 0.50 if the children progress less than 0.75 diopters in the previous year. If the children progress between 1 diopter and 0.75 diopter, then the recommendation is to increase compression factor from low to medium, so 1 diopter. But if we are facing with faster progressor, so myopes that progress very fast year on year, for example, over 1.25 diopters, well, the recommendation, the suggestion is to increase the compression factor from to high compression factor, so 1.50. And you can see here that this is the tool included in the software where easily the ECP can select low, medium, and high to have a better myopia control efficacy on children. Okay. I spoke too much, probably. I hope almost everything was clear. So conclusion is that high myopia is associated with an increased risk of potential ocular pathologies later in life. And don't forget that when we are managing myopia in children, we are also at the same time managing their lifelong risk of eye disease that could happen later in life. And among all the treatment options, all the different treatment options, Ortho-K is one of the most effective, safe, and widely used. So that's all from me. Thank you for listening, and Fakhruddin, over to you. If
Thank you so much, Fabio, for that comprehensive presentation. I think you did cover entire spectrum of myopia, and it was more like a review article, I would say, from efficacy to safety, and then giving us the latest advancements which is coming up in terms of helping patients with myopia, specifically to ortho-K and things like
yeah,
that. So thank you so
I
much for.
usually take some science-based rather than evidence-based, rather than talking for personal experience. I mean, we have the opportunity to collect the latest publication, the latest article, and I was pleased to share with you all during this webinar.
Thank you so much. So okay, great. So I think first and foremost, when we talk about efficacy, the first question which came here, most of the discussion we had was related to the axial length related efficacy. Am I just want to clarify that it's more of to do with
Yeah.
axial length, because I'm sure that when it comes to ortho-K, we only have axial length to compare. So any thoughts over measuring efficacy in that sense? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Fakhruddin. So when we are uh, measuring the efficacy of Ortho-K, the axial length is the most valid option to measure properly the myopia treatment effect, because refraction, due to the fact there is a mold and corneal molding, could be unstable, or the refraction. So the measure of the axial elongation is almost 3 times more accurate than refraction, even if it's performed in sacroplegic or without sacroplegic. So when we are measuring for in ortho-K, in orthokeratology, it's better to have to measure the axial elongation and not the refraction, due to the fact that there is an unstable, a not stable refraction for the due to the molding effect.
Right. Yeah. And I think a couple of studies have also proven that axial length is one of the most important, or I would say the most effective predictor of efficacy anyway. So I think that's a way to go.
Yes.
Great. I think another question which came up is what are your recommendations in selecting our initial patients to predict the success? Is that what baseline refractive errors will predict better outcomes with ortho-K? Is it something like that, or you think it is more of to do with other factors which are involved?
I think so. As far as I know, it's not very clear that if there is a threshold, or if there are other factors that are influencing the myopia progression. So, no, I would say no.
Yeah, I think you did bring up this point where you showed us the comparison of the studies which were published, the toric and the non-toric ortho-K over 2 years, which showed that
Yes.
Baseline refractive error usually is not something which is having a direct prediction for myopia control as well. Yeah.
No prediction, because the sample size was the myopia was 0.50, from 0.50 to -4. So that was the range of the
Yeah.
children, but not in terms of prediction of progressive myopia.
Right. Wonderful, great. And since I think we are talking about orthokeratology, somebody wants to know your recommendation of the topographer, and would you want to comment on the topographic readings, what is important, and also probably a little bit on the device part as well?
I think the acquisition of the topography, as you can see, there is a topography here. It's really important, and if you have a bad quality image, you have a bad fitting. So that's why it's so important that the acquisition is properly done in the best way. So it's really important to acquire the right topo maps for calculating the lens. In the case of Menicon Bloom Night, as I already mentioned, there is the opportunity to use the software that just uploading the topography maps, then the software is able to calculate with the software the first contact lens fit. Which topography will you recommend? I mean, there are several very good topographer in the market, so I cannot mention one in particular, but I don't know, Oculus, Maya, Antares. So there are lots of Medmont. So they are very well machine equipment. So I don't have any preference on this on some of them.
I think I do agree. I think all of them have their own advantages and challenges in terms of using it. But I think more importantly is know your device and use the same one on follow-up, so you're able to kind of do the modifications and if necessary the troubleshooting. So don't use a topographer of an A brand
Another
or an A
one,
design and then go to the other one, then you're
of
confused what's
course.
happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful, great. I think in terms of the comparison slide, I believe in terms of the efficacy slide, we did compare it with single vision lenses most of the time. Was there any
No,
comparison with the myopia control spectacle
no,
lenses?
not at all, because as I explained to you in Romeo to C and MCOS were done in 2012, 2013, where the anti-myopia spectacle didn't exist already. So they were just single vision spectacle, and not comparing, not MyoSmart or Stellest or MyoCare, other anti-myopia spectacle
Spectacles, yeah,
frames.
right. And what are your thoughts on the glaring effect when it comes to ortho-K wearers? Have you experienced, and how would you strategize in this?
Good question. So this is linked to the diameter of the back optic zone. So we used to have 6 millimeters diameter for Menicon Blue Night, and we don't change. So there is the opportunity to reduce, because we know that reducing the treatment zone, reducing the diameter from 6 to 5, for example, we have a better performance in efficacy of the treatment. We can definitely improve the efficacy of the lens, but on the other side, we could have some issues in, for example, during the night with halos or glare. So that's why Menicon is very clear that we keep 6 millimeters in order to avoid to cover the pupil diameter and not to have any side effect like glare or halos during the night. So we prefer to improve the safety and the efficacy, is, as I mentioned, is to increase the compression factor rather than changing the optic zone.
Right. Yeah. I think a couple of questions about the compression factor and the optic zone diameter are coming up. I'm just going to take them one by one. One of it just wants to clarify, probably, I think you did mention in your presentation as well. Is there any difference of the back optic zone diameter versus in myopia control versus myopia correction, I believe is what was it referring to, and any thoughts on that?
Well, again, probably the answer is the same of the previous one. So Menicon Blue Night and Menicon Z Night has one back optic zone diameter, so it's 6 millimeters, and there is no difference between if you are treating a children for myopia control or if you are correcting an adult for myopia correction. I mean, the back optic zone diameter is still 6 millimeters, no changes.
Right. And somebody wants to just clarify on the compression factor as well. And the connecting question is, does the compression factor change based on the patient's keratometry reading, and how would you go about it? If you have a flat cornea, are you going to increase the compression factor and things like that? Would you enlighten us with that?
Yes, compression factor was, or Jessen factor. I mean, the Jessen was the person who invented the compression factor. He's the father of the modern orthokeratology. George Jessen was an American optometrist, and he was the first one who discovered that changing the flattening the base curve, you have a myopic treatment effect, so a reduction of the myopic correction. So the compression factor is considered a kind of buffer of 0.50, 0.75. It depends on the company that are using different compression factor, but it's usually it's less than 1 diopter, and is the buffer that prevent the regression during the day. So you know that orthokeratology is reversible treatment. So if you remove the lens after a certain period of time, the cornea come back to the original shape. So to prevent or to slow down this regression during the day, we have to include an amount of key flattening of the base curve. In diopters is 0.50 to 1 diopters. So if, as I already explained to you in the Pauline Chu study, the latest study in 2022, she measured the treatment effect in 2 different groups. One group was wearing orthokeratology lenses with conventional compression factor, 0.75. The other group was wearing the same lens, but with an increased compression factor by 1.75. So 1 diopter more. This means that the base curve was flattened by 1 diopter more compared to the other one, keeping the rest of the data the same, the same lens. At the end, after 2 years, she and they, because the group realized that in the increased compression factor, you have a better myopia control treatment by comparing to the conventional compression factor by 34% more, which is a really interesting number. So I think in the future, because we are still it's a little bit premature to say that, okay, every children can be treated by increasing compression factor. No, this is not the case. And that's why we prefer to give the options to the ECPs to select the compression factor, taking into account what is the run rate of myopia progression the previous year. So if the children progress less than 0.75 the previous year, then you can go to the low compression factor, to the conventional compression factor, 0.50. If the children is a faster progressor and increase more than 150 diopter, for example, in 1 year, so increase 1 diopter and 50 more, then the suggestion is to increase the compression factor to better control myopia progression. So that's the difference. I mean, this is a really interesting argument, and I'm sure in the near future, we will see some other publication coming over and over talking about the effect of increasing compression factor in orthokeratology.
Yeah, right. And I believe the compression factor, what you're mentioning, is for specific design related changes. I mean, not all designs and not all
No,
companies and industry partners would be able to do that. So I think this is the conceptual thing where change in compression factor is a possible predictor of myopia progression control, but you will definitely have to look at what design you are fitting and think on those
correct.
lines as well, right? Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
right. And I think this question also comes up quite often when we talk about ortho-K, and I think it's good to post it to you as well.
Oh my God.
Would you want to do
Ah.
ortho-K practice based on refractions and K readings, or any thoughts over
Uh,
it?
if you are a good expert of orthokeratology, you can. But I mean, I think the topography is essential to to have a better understanding, a clear picture of the cornea of the numbers of the cornea of the patient. That's why my suggestion is that only refraction and key readings are not enough for the best fitting. If you are fitting myopia for myopia control, I mean, if you are fitting for myopia correction, could be a little bit different. But yes, on top of that, I will. If you don't want to use the topography, refraction key readings, but fluorescein maps are essential to understand how the lens is positioning in the eye. So if you don't want to use topography, but my suggestion is topography is essential for the best fitting with Ortho-K.
Right. Yeah. I think we have a couple of more questions, Fabio. One is regarding, I think, the rebound effect, which we touched upon a little bit
Mm.
in terms of, using different strategies in myopia management. What would be the ideal situation, and we as ECPs can do if we have a rebound effect, and what are your recommendations in taking charge of the rebound effect?
Good question. Again, this is another contradictionary topic, because there are some publications saying that there is a rebound effect, there isn't a rebound effect. So it's not clear. It's not yet already very clear. I mean, that's why I decided to include in my presentation only the latest article published by two of the most international myopia expert, like Mark Bullimore and Noel Brennan. But as I presenting in in this article, they highlight that there is a rebound effect, even if it's small, but there is a rebound effect when you stop wearing overnight orthokeratology lenses. Even if this amount is very small, because we are talking about in the worst case, zero point 0.10 millimeters after 1 year, which is, I mean, reasonable. I mean, it's not so dramatic to manage. But in the best case, we have 0.04, so nothing, so no rebound effect. I mean, it depends, and it depends also on the age of the patient, because if the age of the patient is in between 6 and 16, let's say 17, then we can maybe play a little bit more with the compression factor, for example, with the design of the lens. But after 18 years old, when myopia progress stop suddenly, well, and then after 1 year you have a rebound effect, then in this case, probably the best thing is to fit another treatment option that you have in your toolkit.
Right. Yeah. So I think, yeah, as you mentioned, rebound is something which is now people are talking about it, and a lot of more has to be discovered in how to really go about. First thing, you must know whether it's a real rebound or not. It's sometimes it's more like a progression. We
Correct.
still don't know
Yeah.
whether it's a real rebound, and then once we know it's a rebound, yeah, we need to understand a little bit more in detail, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. We
Right.
need to wait a little bit more for more articles and more
More.
publications.
Right. Yeah. And I think the other aspect of it is the safety aspect, which you did cover about, the lens being used for a specific time. You mentioned that it's usually 1 year, but what if, the patient comes back, the lens is good, the condition is good, and is performing well? What are your recommendations? Would you still let the patient continue the lens, or would you want to change the lens every year? And what should we keep in mind if we want to really, because what happens is these lenses are a bit out of the economical price range in some of the patients
Yeah.
as well, so we try to see if the
Oh,
efficacy is maintained, and
yeah.
we may want to continue. So what are your thoughts over these type of situations?
Well, Fakhruddin, you see that Menicon decided to improve the safety of for children to replace the lens more frequent compared other providers. So that's why we position the lens for 6 months, because we believe that to avoid any kind of issue, any kind of adverse events, for to keep the lens cleaner as possible, we want to replace the lens every 6 months. So at that time is the time where the ECP needs to check and to track what are the current situation of the children. If the children is still progressing myopia, is stable, so it depends. But the recommendation is to replace more often the lens, especially when we are talking about teenager. You remember I show a slide saying that in teenager, the incidence of microbial keratitis is higher than kids. So it's probably better for us to look after this range of age where children are less compliant versus the kids. So that's why we want to replace, we suggest to replace the lens more frequent because of this reason. And the cost is the same, it doesn't change. So it's the full cost is the same that you are paying in 1 year. I mean, if we are talking about the cost.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to replace more frequent for this reason.
Especially for, yeah, so just to avoid that safety part. But what do you think would be the maximum life of the lens? I mean, just out of curiosity, uh
Oh,
how old, I
good
mean, how many
question.
years have you seen, maybe on a personal level, the
Well,
lens being used?
I heard, not my personal experience, but I heard from some international colleagues that someone wore the same lens for 25 years. I mean, but this is this is
This
a
is very
very
extreme. Yeah.
very extreme, very extreme. Well, I think 2 years could be the life for to keep the best the best.
That's
But
all.
again, yeah, yes, two
Yeah.
years.
2 years, yeah, yeah, yeah. As long as you are following your patients up, and at every visit you are examining the lens, inspecting the lens for
Yeah,
any
of course.
deposits, or mechanical
Scratches.
damage,
Yeah,
scratches, and the ocular health is not compromised, and the myopia control and management is working. I think probably, yeah, that would be something we should be looking at, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Wonderful, great. So I think with that, Fabio, we've taken most of the questions which came up on the chat. Thank you so very much for sharing those insights and backing up
It was a
with
pleasure for me.
evidence based. I mean, the latest papers, most of the papers were dated 2022 to 2024. So they were all new publications and
Yeah,
new evidence which is available. So thank you so much for sharing those with us today.
thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. And if anyone else in the chat or still connected wants to reach out to me, they can send me an email, or you can share my email address in case
We will.
they need some more information about it.
Sure, definitely. We'll do that. So thank you so much, everyone, for
Thank you very
attending.
much.
We do have planned sessions over the next weeks, and we will then take care. Be safe, and I hope to see you during the next session. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Fabio.
Bye, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you. Ciao.
afternoon and
Ciao.
evening. Ciao. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.